actually know what I was doing there. I just wanted to do a chair turn for a long time and haven't gotten around to it. Real quick, I've got a new book coming out next week, this week, depends on when you're watching this. And this is the same book series that sent me down my world building thing, so it seemed somewhat appropriate, so we're going to address it today in our weekly-ish, monthly-ish, sometimes world building videos. Too long didn't read. New book coming out. So there's going to be a big sale next week, the week of the 12th through the 15th, I believe, August 12th through 15th. So get ready to buy some books. And if you stick around, I'm going to talk a lot about world building and my first series and why you should buy those books. Not really. All right, so it is my habit, tradition, I guess you should say, whenever I'm putting out a new book, the night before I have a few drinks and then I reminisce about it and write up a blog post, but that is so 2016, I guess, and now I have a YouTube channel, so I'm going to get drunk in front of you on Manhattans. This is my second Manhattan of the evening, and you should only ever have 2 Manhattans in the evening, much like martinis. I will probably have 3. So feel free to listen to my alcoholic ramblings. Thank you for sticking around. Real quick life update, I guess I should say. This has been a while since last video. We were out on vacation, and on the way home I caught COVID, and then the baby caught COVID, and then we ended up in the ER at one point because of seizures, and then we found out that baby is going home. We were fostering, and so the baby is going home to a birth mother after about a year, and we are all kind of broken up right now. Not broken up as a relationship, just torn up. Anyways, so I've not been very creative right now. I didn't really feel like I do anything, but here we are because I put out a book, and of course it was all scheduled to come out, and this week that all this stuff is happening. So that's where we are. The thing is, this book has been cursed. This whole series is cursed. It's kind of dead on the vine, which is like, I put out the last book in the series, book 3, in 2018, I believe it was, and I am a neurophus. I cannot go years between series, but apparently I did, which is upsetting because I actually wrote book 3 and book 4 back to back. I wrote them out as rough drafts and then was going to edit them and then put them out within 6 months of each other was the plan. And how do you make God laugh? You make a plan. I'm going to try to explain all this real quick, but it is really interesting, 5 years later, looking back at it and finally having edited it and seeing like the theme of it is all about raising a kid that is not biologically your own and how do you deal with that. So it is weird how all of this has come back around. So anyways, big picture, I tried to do a thing about this when I re-released these books a few months back. This is Air. This is the world of Air. This is Soul's Harvest is the series name, and it is a flintlock fantasy reimagining the American Civil War. It's an analog revenge story with a female anti-hero, and this is the fun part, it's a mix of Avatar: Last Airbender, True Detective, and Ken Burns' documentary on the Civil War. And if that sounds interesting, you are one of 6 people who actually finds that interesting, me being one of those people. This is kind of a difficult series. It makes you work. I am not going to lie. It probably should have been traditionally published. I should have queried agents. I should have gone that route because it is something. It's N.K. Jemisin's kind of Broken Earth stuff with timeline is screwy, jump back and forth between times. I actually alternate my timeline, so it's one chapter of current timeline and then one of the past, and they interlace, and so by the end of the story, you should be thinking about the character that you met at the beginning differently and her story. And anyways, it's kind of weird, it's kind of big. yeah, the world is huge. This is what set me down, and it's difficult. It is hard work. I expect you to work when you read this book, which is not at all what indie readers want. They really do want escapism. Yeah, so this grimdark female anti-hero, out of time, goofy time stuff didn't really fly very well. It got great reviews, but it wasn't really what people wanted. But like I said, I should have gone trad, but I was doing a lot of movie stuff. In fact, that's going to have a lot to do with it. I come from a screenwriting background, and I was just really sick of producers. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to just write this thing that I want to read. And I'm going to go indie with it because I can just do it the way I want, and I will succeed or fail however I want. And I did not really succeed. So anyways, I made every mistake you could make, including taking 5 years between book 3 and 4. But as I said, I wrote them back to back and really wanted to put them out at the same time. But then I got ulcerative colitis, which is a nice way of saying I was basically pooping myself to death. And so they gave me some medicine for it, and it was steroids. And for about a year, I couldn't think straight because I couldn't sleep. And so I couldn't edit this book. Oddly enough, though, it gave me time to work on these world building books. So it is inadvertently what sent me down this one, and so that's where we are right now. And this work right here, Soul's Harvest, is the best thing I've ever done, and I've got some shows out, I've sold movies, but this is the best thing I've ever done. It is this huge, expansive, massive world with amazing characters and just cool magic and stuff, and it never really got to take off because I kind of messed things up. Like I said, the alternating chapters didn't do it any favors. People are always like, oh, once I get into it, it's okay, but I was trying to channel this Game of Thrones. I specifically remember this moment, and there was this podcast, a screenwriting podcast, what's his name, August, and the guy who did John August, and the guy who did The Hangover, and they were talking about Game of Thrones. They were talking about True Detective. Why it was so amazing is because you meet them at the beginning of their case, and then you meet them these years later, and you're like, what happened between those alternating storylines that made this guy turn into this guy? And that was what I was trying to channel, which is why the alternating chapters kind of thing of meet her as a young girl, the main character, and then Marta, by the way, is her name, and then you meet her the hardened when the story starts, and you're like, this is not the same girl, what happened here? And it's supposed to create intrigue, and I don't know how well it worked, but yeah, and I kind of followed that structure for the whole series. And I have a blog post, and I think I also how I use screenwriting techniques to plot stories. And so I plotted out 4 books based on 3-act structure, which is secretly 4 acts. I might have a note up for why you should see that. And so I did that with the first book, with the series itself. So the first book is all about saving the girl. It is the story itself, the series is really saving the world. Every story, great story, is about saving the world, right? But you don't start it that way for the hero. So the hero starts the story, and it is just, I'm hired to take this little girl deep into enemy territory, this place that I'm considered a traitor and will be killed on sight. I have to take her there, escort her there, so that I can murder that little girl's father. He thinks I am bringing her to her, rescuing her, and my job is to murder that guy when I bring this little girl to him. And yeah, that's my character, that's my situation, and so you start the story with that, and I'm just here to care for this little girl. In fact, I don't care about her, but I care about her by the end of the journey, because yeah, obviously. So the book 2 is the reversal of spoiler alert, by the way, the little girl might be the devil herself. Shit, so we've changed everything up, and that's the reversal that happens at the, anyways, and all the perspectives that we're learning are different. And so the 3rd book, I start the perspective from the villain, who's been the villain this whole time, and he might actually be saving the world, and the hero and everything might be wrong, and da-da-da. And the 4th book, also spoiler alert, because the 3 fans that I have about this have been what perspective are you going to be writing it from? Because each book has a perspective. The first one, the backstory, is the main character. Second one is Luca, her assistant, and he's got an agenda himself. And the 3rd one is the villain, Graf. And then the 4th one, spoiler alert, is the devil herself. She is the villain. She has been the villain behind Graf the whole time, and now we're hearing her perspective of the world that she's experienced from the beginning. and a whole new perspective. So each one is supposed to be given a new perspective on the POV that you're learning about, and changes everything. And this one changes the whole world, and I'm so proud of that, because that is the best thing it is so big and massive, and someone said that it was like working on a macro scale, and I really appreciate that. So anyways, thank you for listening to it if you've listened to it this far into it. And so yeah, one of the things I do is I have my drinks, Second Manhattan, and then I go back and look at things. And this has been a weird one, because I looked back at my notes, and I keep notes from every night that I write of like what I did this night. And so I looked back, and when I started this thing that sent me down this world building path, because if you didn't know, this series did not all right, but it did pretty well in SPIFBO, and everyone commented on how good the world building was, which is what sent me down this world building path. And actually, I ended up writing a Bible before I even started the book series, and it was a 54K Bible, which is the length of more than a novella. This is a full-size book, and that's just the Bible of what the world was, what the story was going to be, who the characters were. And so I looked back at my notes, because I keep these notes, and the first time I mentioned this world, this story, the germ of the idea was in March 8th, 2008. So before the Obama administration. Let's just think about that. And it was a thought experiment. It was like, I'd been watching Avatar, and I was like, what could I do with this? And I kind of like this idea of this big fanciful world and these things. And I started playing with the idea, and that's where the idea of breath came from, and how they make these things, and how the magic system came from. And I developed it just as a thought experiment. And I looked back through my notes some more, and I found Marta, my main character. She was named that because I was watching Reno 911, and there was a character named Marta, and I thought it was a cool name. And this idea fermented for about, was it 6 years? Because the next time I mentioned it again was in 2014, as I was watching the Ken Burns documentary on the Civil War. And I was like, boom, this is the perfect setting for this world that I've created. And I was also, I just watched True Detective. I was like, man, I want to try that whole, timeline, messing with that, which was not great. But I look back at my notes again. I developed this world in a week. And then it was like, well, I've got some time, I'm in between projects, screenwriting projects, so I'll just put the characters together. And I was like, well, I have these characters, so then the plot. And then I think I have a picture of it somewhere of how I built out the plot for 4 books based on a 3-act structure, which is secretly 4. And I look at it now, and I look at the Bible, that 54,000 words that I wrote, which is more than half the length of the first book. And mission statement, I always write a mission statement on these things, and I mentioned the world building and the depth of it and how much important it was to it in the 3rd paragraph of that. And so kind of looking back at it, I can see how it was that this happened. And I wrote the whole thing. I wrote the first book because the producers I was working with are European, and they went on vacation for the summer, but didn't tell me they were going on vacation for the summer. So I kept waiting for them to show up. So I was like, well, I'll just develop this idea. I'll just keep writing. And I kept writing, and I wrote it before they came back. And 9+ years later, I look back on it, and I see these themes that were formed that are prescient and are a part of my life now, like raising a child that is not your own, and wanting to raise them right, and not knowing how you're going to do it, and fear of losing them, and stuff. And that is why this book 4, is dedicated to this little baby that has been with us for a year, and who we love, and we are going to say goodbye to. So anyways, that was, so this is my strongest series, and I'm very proud of it. And even though it is not getting the send-off and the launch that it deserves, I think it's amazing. I hope to surpass it one day, but my God, I finished a book series. A lot of people want to write books, and they don't even write their first one, and I've written my first series, and I'm very proud of it. So if you're watching this and you care, and the sale's going on, go pick up the first 3 books. Are going to be free, and buy the 4th book because it's amazing. And also my world building books will be on sale for $1 a piece, UK and the US. And so buy my book, which is what all this is about. And if you made it this far, cheers.